I used to think detachment meant becoming harder, like the goal was to feel nothing, to act unbothered, to look calm even if your stomach was twisting inside. And honestly, I tried that version. I tried to not care. I tried to shut down the part of me that reacted so quickly, because it was exhausting to live like a weather forecast. One message could bring sunshine, one tone could bring a storm, one silence could turn into a week of overthinking. But here's what I learned the hard way. Numbness is not peace. Numbness is just pain with the volume turned down until it leaks into everything else. Into your relationships, your work, your sleep, your self-respect. Real detachment is different. Detachment isn't the absence of emotion. Detachment is the absence of being controlled by emotion. And it's the space between what happens and what you do next. And that space, no matter how small, is where your power lives. If you're listening to this, I'm going to assume something. You're tired of reacting. Tired of sending the long paragraph you regret later. Tired of replaying conversations in your head like a movie you can't turn off. Tired of needing someone else's approval, clarity, apology, or attention just to feel okay. And you might be afraid that detachment will make you cold. Because you don't want to be heartless. You don't want to stop caring. You don't want to turn into a wall. You just want to stop being pulled around. That's exactly what this audiobook is for. Not to teach you how to become colder, but to teach you how to stay calm while keeping your heart warm. Let me make it real with a quick story. Not a close friend of mine, someone I respect, used to get emotionally hijacked by the smallest things. A delayed reply, a scene with no response, a short message that felt like distance. He would try to act normal, but you could feel it in him. He'd get quieter, he'd lose focus, he'd start checking his phone like it was a heartbeat monitor. One night he admitted, almost embarrassed, "I hate this. I know I shouldn't care this much, but I do." And I understood him, because I've been there too. So we tried something simple, not a new personality, not a don't care mask. Just one rule: no response while emotionally hot. When he felt that spike, anger, anxiety, panic, he would pause. 10 seconds, one deep breath, and a question. What am I about to do that I'll regret? At first it felt impossible, like holding back a sneeze, like swallowing words that wanted to explode. But after a few weeks, something changed. He didn't become colder, he became steadier. And steadiness is attractive, it's powerful, it's leadership. The second story is closer to home. Someone in my family has a good heart, so good that she used to carry everyone's emotions like they were her responsibility. If someone was stressed, she was stressed. If someone was upset, she felt guilty. She would over-explain, over-apologize, and overthink every interaction just to keep peace. But it wasn't peace. It was self-abandonment. One day she said quietly, "I feel like I'm living inside everyone else's mood." That sentence is why I believe detachment is not selfish. It's necessary. Because detachment is you saying, "I can love you," without losing myself. She started practicing warm boundaries. Ours not harsh, not rude, just clear. She listened without absorbing. She helped without rescuing. She stayed kind without being consumed. And what happened surprised her. Her relationships got healthier. People began to respect her energy because she finally respected it first. That's what we're building in this audiobook. Over the next 8 chapters, you'll learn how to create that space, again and again, until calm becomes your default. You'll learn how to pause before reacting, detach from validation, stop feeding rumination, set warm boundaries, and become unbothered without going numb. So here's my invitation to you. As you listen, don't just understand this. Practice it. Even in the smallest moments, especially in the smallest moments. because that's where your life changes. And before we begin, I want you to think of one person, just one, a friend, a sibling, someone you care about, who is constantly being dragged around by their emotions, their overthinking, their anxiety, their reactions. If this audiobook can help you, it can help them too. So share this with them, not to fix them, just to remind them there's another way to live. All right, let's begin. Chapter 1. Detachment is not coldness. If you only remember one thing from this chapter, remember this. Detachment is not shutting your heart. Detachment is holding your center. A lot of people hear the word detachment and picture someone distant, someone dry, someone who doesn't care, someone who walks away the moment anything gets uncomfortable. But that isn't emotional strength. That's emotional avoidance. Coldness usually comes from pain. You get hurt and you decide the safest way to live is to stop feeling. You stop trusting, you stop opening up, you stop needing. From the outside, it can look like confidence because you seem unbothered. But inside, it isn't peace. It's fear dressed up as control. Detachment is different. Detachment isn't the absence of emotion. It's the absence of being controlled by emotion. It's you saying, I care, but I won't collapse. It's you staying present without being pulled under. And let's be honest, coldness can look like it works. When you don't show emotion, people can't read you. When you act like you don't care, nobody can reject you. When you detach in a harsh way, you don't have to face how much you wanted something. Coldness feels like protection, but it comes with a cost. It disconnects you from the best parts of you. Your warmth, your empathy, your ability to connect deeply, your ability to love without fear. And here's the truth most people learn too late. When you become cold, you don't just stop feeling pain. You also stop feeling meaning. You can't numb one emotion without numbing the whole system. That's why some people win emotionally. Nobody can trigger them anymore. But they also feel empty. Life starts to feel like it's happening through glass. That's not the goal here. The goal isn't to stop caring. The goal is to stop reacting. Because caring is human. Caring is real. Caring is what keeps you connected to life. But reacting, impulsively, emotionally, without choice, that's what steals your power. Reacting is sending the message you regret later. Reacting is proving yourself to someone who already decided not to understand you. Reacting is chasing attention like it defines your worth. Reacting is replaying a moment until it becomes a wound. Detachment is you stepping back and saying, I feel the pull, I feel the emotion, but I'm not going to be dragged by it. Here's a simple way to tell the difference between detachment and coldness. Coldness punishes. Detachment protects. Coldness goes silent to make the other person suffer. Detachment goes quiet to keep your dignity. Coldness withdraws to control. Detachment withdraws to breathe. Coldness says, you don't matter. Detachment says, my peace matters. One is ego, the other is self-respect. I want to make this real. I remember a moment when someone I cared about said something that hit a nerve. It wasn't even a dramatic insult. Just a careless comment that made me feel small. My first impulse was to react, to correct them, to explain myself, to prove my intentions, to defend my value right there in the moment. I felt it in my body. A tight chest, a fast mind, that urgent need to type and send something sharp. But I didn't. I put the phone down. Not to punish them. Not to win. Just to give myself a chance to stay aligned with who I wanted to be. So in that moment taught me something I still come back to. Detachment isn't a personality. It's a pause. A pause that saves you from becoming someone you don't respect later. Because what you do when you're triggered becomes your identity if you repeat it enough. So here's the core skill we're building. You learn to feel it, but you don't follow it. Say it to yourself when you need it. I can feel this, without following it. You're not denying the emotion. You're not pretending you're above it. You're just refusing to let it take the wheel. Because emotions are not always wrong, but they are often incomplete. They're a signal, not a conclusion. If you treat every emotion like a command, your life becomes chaotic. If you treat emotions like information, your life becomes clear. Try this the next time you get triggered. One, name what you're feeling: anger, fear, jealousy, shame, neediness, disappointment. Then notice where it lives in your body, your chest, your throat, your stomach, your jaw, and then give it 10 seconds of space. One slow breath, no message, no decision, no action, just space. That's it. The goal isn't to become emotionless. The goal is to become uncontrollable by emotion. And when you build this, you don't become colder, you become calmer. And calm changes everything. Calm makes you harder to manipulate. Calm makes you clearer in conflict. Calm makes you stronger in decisions. Calm makes you safer to love because you don't explode and you don't disappear. Detachment isn't distance, it's stability. And in the next chapter, we're going to train the most practical form of stability you can develop. The pause. The space where your power lives. Chapter 2. The pause. Where your power lives. Most people don't lose control because they're weak. They lose control because everything happens too fast. A tone, a look, a message, a silence. And before they even understand what they're feeling, they've already reacted. They've already sent the text. They've already raised their voice. They've already defended themselves. They've already walked away dramatically. They've already made a decision from a place they won't respect tomorrow. That's why the pause is not a small thing. The pause is the difference between reaction and response, between chaos and control, between "I couldn't help it" and "I chose who I wanted to be." If detachment is the mindset, the pause is the muscle. And the best part is, this is a skill you can train. Because the goal isn't to become a calm person in theory. The goal is to become calm in the exact moment your nervous system is screaming, "Do something right now." Here's the truth. Your first impulse is not your highest self. Your first impulse is usually your protective self, your wounded self, your ego trying to survive, your fear trying to regain control. The pause is where you give your higher self time to arrive. I've seen this change someone's life in a way that looked almost too simple to be real. A friend of mine used to respond instantly whenever he felt anxious. If someone didn't reply fast, he'd send another message. If the tone felt off, he'd ask, "Are you mad at me?" If he felt distance, he tried to close it immediately because the discomfort felt unbearable. And he told me something that sounded small but wasn't small at all. When I don't respond, I feel like I'm losing. That's the addiction, not to the person, to the relief. Reacting gives you a temporary sense of control. It gives you a quick release. It feels like you're fixing something. But most of the time, you're not fixing anything. You're feeding the cycle. So we tried one rule. Not forever. Just one rule for 1 week. No emotional decisions in the first 90 seconds, because the body has a wave, a spike, a surge, and most spikes fade if you don't obey them. The first day was hard. He literally felt the urge in his fingers. The brain goes, "Text now, ask now, fix it now." But he waited. 90 seconds, one breath, then another. And when the wave passed, he said something that made me smile. "It's crazy. I still feel it, but I'm not dying anymore." That's what the pause gives you. It proves to your body you can survive discomfort without reacting, and that's where real strength begins. Because the person who can sit in discomfort without making it everyone else's problem is dangerous in the best way. Let's make the pause practical. You don't need a meditation retreat. You don't need to become a monk. You need a microspace. Here's the method I want you to use. Simple, repeatable, quiet. When you feel triggered, step 1. Stop. Don't type. Don't speak. Don't explain. Don't defend. Just stop. Step 2. Breathe low and slow. Not big dramatic breaths. Just one slow breath that tells your nervous system, we're safe. Step 3. Ask one question, not 10 questions. 1. Here are the best ones. What is this emotion trying to protect? If I respond right now, what will I regret? What would the calm version of me do? Is this urgent, or is it just uncomfortable? That question is everything, because questions slow you down. Questions create distance. Questions interrupt the autopilot, and that's the point. Detachment is not you becoming passive. Detachment is you becoming deliberate. Now, I want to talk about something most people misunderstand. The pause is not weakness. People think strength is fast, sharp, immediate. Like power is having an answer right now. But real power is measured by how little you need to prove in the moment. If you're truly strong, you don't need to win every conversation. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to defend every part of your identity. Sometimes the strongest move is letting the moment pass without feeding it. Now, that's not avoidance, that's discipline. And here's how you know you're doing it right. After the pause, you feel clearer, not necessarily happier, not instantly, but clearer. You can see the emotion without being inside it. You can choose a response that reflects who you are, not what you felt for 5 seconds. This is how detachment becomes warm. Because when you pause, you stop weaponizing your emotions. You stop using silence as punishment. You stop using words as knives. You become calmer and kinder. Not because you're trying to be nice, but because your nervous system isn't in survival mode anymore. Let me give you a small challenge for today. The next time you feel the urge to react, especially in a relationship, especially when your ego is activated, do this. Wait 10 seconds. That's it. 10 seconds before you speak. 10 seconds before you text. 10 seconds before you send that paragraph. And in those 10 seconds, repeat one sentence. I can wait. I don't have to rush. Because the person who doesn't rush controls the room. And the more you practice this, the more you'll notice something almost shocking. Your peace is not something people give you, it's something you claim. In the next chapter, we're going to expose the real reason you get triggered so easily by certain people, and how to stop giving them the remote control to your emotional state. Chapter 3. Stop handing people the remote control. There's a moment most people don't notice, because it happens in a fraction of a second. Someone says something. Someone does something. Someone doesn't do something. And suddenly your mood changes. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts speed up. Your confidence drops. Your energy collapses. And if you're honest, it feels like they did that to you. But here's the uncomfortable truth that creates freedom. They didn't take your power. You handed it to them. Not because you're weak. Not because you're broken. Because somewhere along the way your brain learned a pattern. If they approve of me, I'm safe. If they respond, I'm okay. If they respect me, I have value. If they don't, something is wrong. That's the remote control. And the moment you let someone else hold it, your emotional state becomes something they can change with one button. A message, a tone, a look, a delay, a comparison, a joke that lands wrong. And then you're no longer living your life. You're reacting to theirs. Let's name the most common buttons. The first one is silence. Silence is powerful because your mind hates uncertainty. When someone goes quiet, you don't just feel the silence. You fill it with meaning. They're mad. They're losing interest. I did something wrong. They're talking to someone else. I'm not enough. The second button is disrespect. Not big, dramatic disrespect. The small kind, the subtle kind, the interruption, the dismissive tone, the eye roll, the joke that makes you feel small. The third button is comparison. Someone else gets praised and you feel invisible. Someone else gets chosen and you feel rejected. Someone else looks confident and you feel behind. And the fourth button, the most dangerous one, is rejection. Real or imagined. Because rejection doesn't just hurt your feelings, it threatens your identity. Now here's where detachment becomes real, not theoretical. Detachment is you noticing the button being pushed and refusing to press it back. Most people push back instantly. Silence triggers them, so they chase. Disrespect triggers them, so they explode. Comparison triggers them, so they compete. Rejection triggers them, so they beg or they shut down. And every one of those reactions is a giveaway. It tells the other person, if you do this, you control me. So how do we take the remote back? You start with a simple sentence. Think a sentence that sounds small but changes everything. This is a trigger, not a truth. Say it again. This is a trigger, not a truth. Because the moment you label it as a trigger, you create distance. You stop treating your feelings like facts. You stop building your life around a temporary spike. I want to tell you about a friend of mine who had one major button: being ignored. If someone didn't reply quickly, his mind would spiral. He would send follow-up texts. He'd try to fix the silence. He'd ask questions he didn't even want the answers to, just to relieve the anxiety. And one day he said something that was painful to hear. I feel like I'm waiting to be chosen. That's the remote control. Because when you feel like you're waiting to be chosen, you'll tolerate things you shouldn't. You'll accept breadcrumbs. Now you'll trade dignity for reassurance. So we practiced something that looked almost too simple. When he felt that urge to chase, he did the pause from the last chapter, and then he asked one question. What am I trying to get from them that I'm refusing to give myself? Sometimes the answer was reassurance. Sometimes it was validation. Sometimes it was security. Sometimes it was control. And when he saw the answer, he started doing something new. Instead of chasing a reply, he gave himself reassurance. Not with affirmations that feel fake, but with reality. He would literally say, I'm safe, I'm okay. I don't need to beg for attention to have value. If they want to talk, they will. If they don't, I will still be fine. And the first few times, it felt unnatural. Because you're basically breaking an addiction. There's the addiction to external stability. But after a while, something shifted. He stopped taking silence personally. He stopped giving people the power to define his worth with a notification. He took the remote back. And the interesting part is, people started respecting him more. Not because he became colder, because he became less controllable. That's the paradox. The more you chase, the less you're valued. The more you center yourself, the more your presence carries weight. Now, I want to make this practical for you. I want you to identify your top 3 buttons. Not intellectually. Honestly. What instantly changes your mood? Is it being criticized? Is it being ignored? Is it being disrespected? Is it being misunderstood? Is it not being included? Is it feeling replaced? Pick 3. And here's the next step. This is where detachment becomes a daily practice. When the button gets pushed, don't run from the feeling. Just do this sequence. Name the button. This is the ignored button. This is the disrespect button. This is the not enough button. Pause. 10 seconds. 1 breath. Choose your standard. What does the calm version of me do next? Not the wounded version. The calm version. Sometimes the answer is, say nothing. Sometimes the answer is, speak once, clearly. Sometimes the answer is, walk away. Sometimes the answer is, set a boundary. Sometimes the answer is, let it pass. But the point is, you choose, and choice is power. Because detachment isn't you letting people treat you badly. Detachment is you refusing to let their behavior decide who you become. You can still have standards. You can still have boundaries. You can still leave, but you leave without chaos. You speak without begging. You stay calm without going numb. That's what it means to stop handing people the remote control. In the next chapter, we're going to go deeper into one of the biggest reasons you hand that remote away in the first place. The hunger for validation, and how to detach from it without losing your ambition or your heart. Chapter 4. Detach from validation. Most people don't realize how much of their emotional life is built on one question: do they approve of me? And that question can quietly run your entire day. If they praise you, you feel light. If they ignore you, you feel heavy. If they disagree, you feel threatened. If they misunderstand you, you feel desperate to explain. That's not confidence, that's dependency, and it's exhausting because approval is unstable. You can do everything right and still not get it. You can be kind and still be criticized. You can be honest and still be misread. You can give your best and still be overlooked. So if your peace depends on validation, your peace is always at risk. Detachment begins when you stop negotiating your worth in other people's minds. Let's talk about how this shows up. Because it's sneaky. The validation dependency doesn't always look like insecurity. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it looks like ambition. Sometimes it looks like being the reliable one, the nice one, the strong one. It can look like over-explaining your intentions, over-apologizing for existing, over-performing so no one can criticize you, saying yes when you mean no, trying to be understood by someone who isn't listening. And here's the painful part. You can be loved and still chase validation, because validation is not the same as love. Validation is a temporary hit. Love is stable. Validation says, you're good today. Love says, you are enough even on your worst day. If you grew up in an environment where love felt conditional, where you got attention when you performed or behaved, or achieved, you might not even realize you're still living under that system. You might still be working for approval like it's oxygen. I've watched this pattern in someone close to me, someone in my family who is genuinely capable, genuinely caring, and still constantly anxious about being judged. They would do something kind and then immediately wonder if it was appreciated. They would speak up and then replay the conversation for hours. They would receive a small criticism and feel like the entire relationship was unsafe. And I remember them telling me, I just don't want people to think badly of me. That sentence sounds normal until you realize how much it costs. Because if your main goal is, don't let anyone think badly of me, you'll end up shrinking your real self to fit their comfort. You'll become easy to control. Sense and detachment is you saying, I'm done living like that. Now this is important. Detaching from validation does not mean you stop caring about doing well. It means you stop letting people's reactions decide your identity. You can still improve. You can still take feedback. You can still aim high. But you stop begging for emotional permission to feel okay. Here's the shift. Instead of asking, do they approve of me? You ask, am I aligned with my standards? Because standards are stable. Approval changes. Standards don't. When you live by standards, criticism becomes information, not a threat. Praise becomes appreciation, not a drug. And you become emotionally independent. Let me tell you the most common trap. Over-explaining. Over-explaining feels like clarity, but it's often anxiety. It's you trying to control the story in someone else's head. It's you trying to be understood by force. But here's the truth that hurts your ego and heals your life. People who want to understand you will. People who don't, won't, no matter how perfect your explanation is. Detachment is knowing when to speak once and stop. Because if you keep talking to convince someone, you're not communicating anymore. You're negotiating your worth. So here's a practice I want you to try. The next time you feel that urge to prove yourself, do this. Pause and ask, what am I afraid they will believe about me? Then ask the deeper question, if they believe that, will I still be okay? This is where you take your power back. Because the truth is, some people will misunderstand you. Some people will judge you unfairly. Some people will project their own pain onto you, and if you build your identity around their opinion, you'll spend your whole life living in defense mode. Detachment is you letting them have their opinion without letting it have you. Now, I want to give you a simple rule that changed how I move. Earn your own approval first. Before you seek reassurance, give yourself honesty. Before you chase praise, check your effort. Before you fear criticism, ask if you showed up with integrity. This doesn't mean you become arrogant. It means you become rooted. And when you're rooted, the world can shake, but you don't fall. Here's your micro practice for this chapter. For one day, stop proving. No proving you're right. No proving you're good. No proving you're worthy. No proving you're the best. Just act from standards. Speak clearly. Do your work. Be kind. Set boundaries. Leave the rest. And if someone misunderstands you, let it be uncomfortable without rushing to fix it. Because detachment is not the absence of discomfort. Detachment is your ability to tolerate discomfort without betraying yourself. In the next chapter, we're going to sharpen this even further. How to let people be wrong about you and still keep your dignity, your calm, and your warm heart. Chapter 5. Let people be wrong about you. There's a kind of freedom that feels almost illegal when you experience it for the first time. It's the freedom of not correcting, not defending, not explaining, not chasing someone's understanding like your life depends on it. Just letting them be wrong about you. Because here's what most people don't realize. A huge part of your stress isn't coming from what's happening. It's coming from your need to control the story in other people's heads. You want them to see your intentions. You want them to understand your heart. You want them to know you're not a bad person. You want them to respect you the way you think you deserve. And when they don't, when they misread you, judge you, twist your words, or reduce you to a label, you feel this internal panic. I have to fix this. I have to explain. I have to set the record straight. But that impulse is one of the biggest places you leak power. Because when you rush to correct people, you're telling them, my peace depends on what you believe about me. Detachment is you taking that dependence away. Now, I need to say something carefully. Letting people be wrong about you does not mean you tolerate disrespect. It doesn't mean you accept lies. It doesn't mean you become passive. It means you choose your battles, and you stop bleeding energy for battles that don't change anything. Because not every misunderstanding is worth your nervous system. Not every opinion deserves your explanation. Not every person is qualified to hold the truth about you. That last line matters. Some people judge you from their insecurity. Some people misunderstand you because they don't listen. Some people don't want clarity, they want control. Some people reduce you because it makes them feel bigger. And if you keep trying to convince those people, you'll exhaust yourself. I've watched this happen to a friend of mine in a workplace situation. He was competent, consistent, and respectful. But there was one person who constantly implied he wasn't doing enough. Little comments, side jokes, quiet disrespect, and my friend kept trying to fix it the good way. He explained his decisions. He showed receipts. He worked harder. He tried to prove he was valuable. But the more he proved, the more the other person pushed. Then one day he said something that hit me. I feel like I'm on trial. That's what it feels like when you're stuck needing to be understood by someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. So he changed one thing. He stopped defending. He started speaking once, clearly, and then letting his results do the rest. No extra paragraphs, no emotional energy, no trying to make them see. He kept his standards high, but his explanations short. And slowly, something happened. He stopped feeling like a victim because he wasn't begging for a fair verdict anymore. He was building a life that didn't require constant approval. That's detachment. Here's the truth. People will be wrong about you. Sometimes on purpose, sometimes by accident, sometimes because they only see a small part of you, sometimes because they're committed to their version of the story. And you don't always get to correct it. Even if you explain perfectly, they might still believe what they want. So the question becomes, do you want to be right in their eyes? Or do you want to be at peace? Because chasing peace through explanation rarely works. The real power move is this. You decide who you are, you act accordingly, and you let time handle perception. This is hard because the ego hates being misunderstood. The ego wants control, it wants reputation, it wants to win the narrative. But detachment is you stepping out of ego and into self-respect. You don't need to be seen correctly by everyone. You need to be aligned with yourself. Now, there are moments you should speak up. If someone crosses a boundary, if someone lies in a way that causes real harm, and if someone disrespects you directly. Detachment doesn't mean silence forever. It means your words become intentional. So here's the practice for this chapter. When you feel misunderstood, ask yourself 2 questions. First, will explaining this change anything? If the answer is no, stop. Second, am I explaining for clarity or for approval? If it's approval, stop. Because when you explain for approval, you're not communicating. You're pleading, and pleading drains your power. Instead, practice the clean response. 1 sentence. Calm, clear. No emotion, no extra. Examples. I hear you. That's not accurate. I'm not going to debate this. I'm clear on my decision. I won't continue this conversation if it stays disrespectful. Then silence. That silence is not punishment. It's control. And it's you refusing to be pulled into a cycle where your nervous system is the price of someone else's opinion. And yes, this will feel uncomfortable at first. Your mind will scream, fix it, explain it, prove it. That's withdrawal, because you're withdrawing from validation. But when you stay steady through that discomfort, you earn a new kind of confidence, the kind that doesn't require agreement. That's when detachment becomes real. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about the place where most people lose that steadiness, even when they stay silent. The overthinking loop, the rumination, the mental replay that keeps you trapped even when nothing is happening anymore. We're going to break that loop. Chapter 6. Detach from rumination. Rumination is one of the quietest ways you lose your life. Because from the outside, nothing is happening. You're sitting in a room, you're scrolling, you're driving, you're lying in bed, but inside your head, you're in the same conversation again, the same sentence, the same moment, the same look, the same, I should have said, the same, why did they do that, the same, what if this means? And the more you replay it, the heavier it gets. This is why detachment isn't only about your reactions to people. It's also about your reactions to your own mind. Because sometimes the real enemy isn't what happened. It's what you keep doing with it afterward. Rumination is not reflection. Reflection is when you learn and move forward. Rumination is when you bleed and call it thinking. Reflection asks, what can I do next time? Rumination asks, why wasn't I enough? Reflection creates clarity. Rumination creates obsession. And here's the truth. Rumination feels productive. It feels like you're solving something. But most of the time, you're just feeding pain with attention. Your mind believes, if I think about it enough, I'll finally feel safe. But safety doesn't come from looping. Safety comes from closure, and sometimes closure is not an answer. Sometimes closure is a decision. I've seen this pattern in someone close to me, someone who's smart, sensitive, and sincere. After any conflict, they would replay the entire thing for days. They'd analyze every word, every tone, every pause. They'd try to decode what it meant, what the other person really felt, what they should have done differently. And the worst part, and they were punishing themselves for being human. One night they told me, I can't turn it off. And I told them something I want you to remember. Your mind is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you safe. So when something feels uncertain, rejection, conflict, embarrassment, your mind starts scanning for threats. It replays because it thinks replaying will prevent pain next time. But if you don't interrupt it, the mind becomes a cage. So how do you detach from rumination? Not by fighting your thoughts, not by forcing yourself to stop thinking. That rarely works. You detach by changing your relationship to the thought, by recognizing this is a loop, not a message. Here's the first key. Name it. The moment you notice you're replaying, you say, this is rumination. Not I'm broken, not I'm weak, just this is rumination. That label creates distance, because when you label it, you stop being inside it. You become the observer. And the observer is where detachment lives. The second key is this. Separate pain from story. Pain is real, but your mind adds story. Pain is, that hurt. Story is, it hurt because I'm not enough. Pain is, they pulled away. Story is, they pulled away because I'm unlovable. Pain is, I made a mistake. Story is, I always ruin everything. The story is what keeps you stuck. Detachment is you letting the pain exist without adding a whole identity to it. Now the third key is the one that actually breaks the loop. Move your body into a small action. Because rumination is a mental freeze. Your mind loops when your body is inactive. So you need to give your nervous system a signal. We are moving forward, not a big action, a small one. 5 minutes. Here's the rule. When you catch yourself looping, do one small action for 5 minutes. Wash a few dishes. Clean one corner of your room. Do 10 push-ups. Write 3 sentences in a notebook. Take a short walk. Drink water slowly. Why? Because action tells your brain the threat is not here. And when the brain feels safe, it releases the loop. Let me give you a practice that's simple but powerful. It's a 2-line journal. When you're stuck in rumination, write, what happened in 1 sentence. What I'm choosing now, and in 1 sentence. Example. What happened? They criticized me in front of others. What I'm choosing now, I will improve what matters and stop replaying the tone. Or, what happened? They didn't respond. What I'm choosing now, I will not chase. If they want to talk, they will. That second line is everything. Because detachment is not just awareness. It's a choice. Now there's one more piece that matters. Because sometimes rumination is your mind trying to get you to do something you're avoiding. Sometimes the loop continues because you haven't made a decision. You haven't set a boundary. You haven't had the hard conversation. You haven't accepted the truth. You haven't walked away. Rumination often ends when you choose. Not when you understand everything. When you choose. So if you're looping, you ask yourself this. What decision am I avoiding? Maybe you're avoiding accepting that someone isn't consistent. Maybe you're avoiding admitting you were disrespected. Maybe you're avoiding letting go. Maybe you're avoiding saying no. Detachment isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's simply honest, and honesty ends loops. Here's your challenge from this chapter. For the next 24 hours, every time you catch yourself replaying, do 3 things. Name it. This is rumination. Breathe once, slow, then move into one 5-minute action. Not to distract, to reset. Because you're training your mind to understand. We don't live in loops anymore. We live in choices. In the next chapter, we're going to take everything you've learned and turn it into something that protects you long-term. Warm boundaries. How to stay kind without being consumed. How to care without collapsing. Chapter 7. Warm boundaries. Soft heart, strong spine. There's a reason some of the kindest people you know are also the most exhausted. They care deeply, they listen, they give. They try to keep the peace, and slowly, without noticing, they become the emotional trash can for everyone else. Not because they're weak, because they never learned the difference between compassion and absorption. They never learned that you can love people without carrying them. This chapter is about that difference, because detachment without boundaries becomes avoidance, and boundaries without warmth become coldness. What you want is something rare and powerful, a soft heart with a strong spine. Warm boundaries are not walls. Walls say, don't come close. Warm boundaries say, you can come close, just not at the cost of my peace. And if you struggle with boundaries, it's usually for one reason. You confuse boundaries with being mean. You think saying no is rude. You think needing space is selfish. You think protecting your energy makes you a bad person. But here's the truth. If you can't say no, your yes is not love. Your yes is fear. Fear of conflict. Fear of being disliked. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of disappointing people. Detachment is you choosing honesty over fear. Let me tell you something I've watched closely, because it changed how I see love. Someone in my family has always been the strong one, the one who holds everything together, the one who answers the phone, the one who listens to everyone's problems, the one who fixes. And for years, they wore that role like a badge of honor, and until it started breaking them. They'd take care of everyone, then go quiet at night. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind of quiet where your body is tired but your mind can't rest, because it's still holding everyone's stress. One day they said, I'm tired, but I don't know how to stop. That's when I realized some people don't need more love. They need boundaries, so their love can survive. Because love without limits becomes resentment, and resentment is how warm people become cold. So how do you build warm boundaries? You start by accepting this. Your peace is your responsibility, not your partner's job, not your friend's job, not your family's job, not your co-worker's job. They might care, they might try, but they will never protect your nervous system as well as you can. So you protect it without cruelty. Now here's what a warm boundary sounds like. Not aggressive, not apologetic, just clear. I can't do that. Not today. I need time. I'm not available for this conversation if it stays disrespectful. I care about you, but I can't carry this for you. Notice the tone. There's no long story, no begging to be understood, no over-explaining. That's detachment in action. Most people don't set boundaries because they think they need the perfect words. You don't. You need a calm nervous system. That's why the pause from chapter 2 matters here. You pause first, then you speak from clarity. Because if you try to set boundaries while triggered, it comes out sharp or messy or emotional, and then you feel guilty, and you undo it, and you go back to the same cycle. Warm boundaries are stable, repeated, boring even. And boring is good. Because when boundaries become normal, your life becomes peaceful. Now let's talk about the hardest boundary of all, the boundary with someone you love. Because with strangers, it's easy. But with people you love, guilt shows up. You feel responsible for their feelings. You feel like you owe them access. You feel like you have to keep proving you care. Here's the truth. You can care deeply and still say no. Saying no is not rejecting them, it's respecting yourself. And ironically, people often respect you more when you stop overgiving. Because overgiving doesn't create closeness, it creates imbalance. It creates a relationship where you are always empty and they are always comfortable. That's not love. That's a pattern. So here's a simple framework I want you to use. When someone asks for something, your time, your attention, to your emotional labor, check these 3 things. Capacity, do I have the energy for this right now? Cost, what will I lose if I say yes? Choice, am I saying yes from love or from fear? If you're saying yes from fear, pause, because that yes will eventually turn into resentment. Now I want to give you 3 boundary sentences you can keep in your pocket. These are warm, clean, and powerful. First, I can't do that right now. No apology, no story, just truth. Second, I need time to think about this. This protects you from making emotional yeses. Third, I care about you, but I'm not available for this dynamic. This is for repeated patterns, drama, disrespect, emotional dumping. And if you feel guilty after setting a boundary, remember this. Guilt is not proof that you did something wrong. Guilt is often proof that you're doing something new. If you were trained to overgive, then self-respect will feel uncomfortable at first. That's normal. Your nervous system is learning a new language. Here's the result of warm boundaries. You stop absorbing other people's chaos. You stop becoming an emotional sponge. You stop disappearing to keep everyone else comfortable. And you don't become cold. You become clear. And clarity is kindness. Because when you're clear, people don't have to guess. They don't have to push. They don't have to test. They know where you stand. Warm boundaries make your love sustainable. They keep your heart soft without letting your life fall apart. In the next chapter, we're going to bring everything together into the final form of detachment. How to become unbothered without becoming numb. How to stay calm under pressure and still stay human. Chapter 8. Unbought, not numb. There's a difference between being unbothered and being numb. Being unbothered is powerful. Being numb is a warning sign. Unbothered means you feel the emotion, but it doesn't own you. Numb means you stop feeling because you don't trust yourself to handle what you feel. Unbothered is calm with a warm heart. Numb is calm with no heart. And if you've ever tried to detach the wrong way, you know the cost. You stop reacting, but you also stop connecting. You stop caring, but you also stop enjoying. You stop being hurt, but you also stop being fully alive. That's not emotional mastery. That's survival mode. So the goal of this chapter, the final chapter, is to help you land in the sweet spot. Steady, not shut down. Calm, not cold. Present, not reactive. Here's what unbothered really looks like. It's not a facial expression. It's not silence. It's not acting like you don't care. Unbothered is inner stability. It's when someone tries to pull you into drama and you don't enter. It's when someone gives you attitude and you don't mirror it. It's when life becomes uncertain and you don't collapse into panic. Not because you don't feel anything, but because you've trained yourself to respond from standards, not spikes. And that training is what you've been doing through every chapter. You learn the pause. You learn to stop handing people the remote. You learn to detach from validation. You learn to let people be wrong about you. You learn to detach from rumination. You learned warm boundaries. Now we turn that into a stable identity. Because here's the truth. You don't rise to the level of your intentions. It's like you fall to the level of your habits. So, unbothered is a habit of not reacting immediately, a habit of not chasing clarity when you're triggered, a habit of not proving yourself to insecure people, a habit of not replaying pain until it becomes a personality, a habit of protecting your peace without punishing others. Let me give you a real-life picture. Think about someone you respect, someone calm, not fake calm, real calm. When they're criticized, they don't crumble. When they're misunderstood, they don't beg. When they're ignored, they don't chase. When they're stressed, they don't make it everyone's problem. They're not perfect. They just have a strong center, and that center comes from one decision they made a long time ago. My nervous system is my responsibility. Now, if you're listening and thinking, okay, but how do I actually become like that? Here's the simplest answer. You practice choosing your response when it matters most, not when you're calm already, when you're activated. Because calm practiced in calm moments is easy. Calm practiced in triggering moments is power. So here's the core formula I want to leave you with. It's the whole audiobook in 3 steps. Pause, observe, choose. Pause, stop the autopilot. Observe, name what's happening inside you. Choose, act from standards, not emotion. That's detachment. Now let's talk about the emotional part, because this is where people go wrong. When you're building detachment, you will sometimes feel less dramatic, less intense, less obsessed. And at first, your mind may interpret that as, I don't care. But what's actually happening is, you're no longer addicted to emotional spikes. A lot of people confuse intensity with love. They think if it doesn't hurt, it isn't real. If it doesn't trigger them, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't consume them, it isn't deep. That's not love. That's attachment to chaos. Unbothered doesn't mean nothing matters. It means your peace matters too. It means you can care without collapsing. Say that line with me. I can care without collapsing. This is the warm heart. You still feel empathy. You still feel love. You still feel sadness. You still feel disappointment. But you don't let those feelings become your steering wheel. Now I want to give you a practical 7-day practice. Something simple, but consistent. For the next 7 days. When you feel triggered, please wait 10 seconds before responding. If you feel the urge to explain yourself, speak once, then stop. If you catch a rumination loop, do one 5-minute action. Set one warm boundary per day, even a small one. At night, write one line. Today I chose calm when I could have reacted. That's it, because identity is built by evidence. The more you collect evidence that you can stay calm, the more your brain believes it. And then unbothered becomes natural, not forced, not acted, natural. Here's the final truth I want to leave you with. Detachment is not you becoming less human. Detachment is you becoming more free. Free from the need to be understood by everyone. Free from the need to win every moment. Free from the need to react to every trigger. Free from the mind that tries to replay pain forever. You become the kind of person who can sit in discomfort without destroying something. You become the kind of person who can be kind without being consumed. You become unbothered without becoming numb. And now, before we close, I want to bring this all home in the outro, because you didn't come this far just to understand it. You came this far to live it. If you've stayed with me to the end, I want you to pause for a second and recognize something simple but important. You didn't just listen to ideas, you listened to a different way of living. A way where your emotions can exist without controlling you. A way where other people can be unpredictable without stealing your peace. A way where you can stay warm, human and kind without becoming easy to manipulate. And I want to tell you my honest opinion as the writer of this audiobook. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength, because people assume strength is loud, sharp, dominant, fast. But the strongest people I've ever met weren't the most intense. They were the most steady. They didn't need to prove everything. They didn't need to react to everything. They didn't need to win every moment to feel valuable. where they had something rarer than confidence. They had self-control. And self-control isn't about forcing yourself to feel nothing. It's about giving yourself enough space to choose. That space, the pause, becomes a sanctuary. It becomes the moment where you remember who you are. Because most regret is not born from bad intentions. Most regret is born from emotional speed, a reaction that happened too quickly, a sentence that escaped before wisdom arrived, a decision made in panic, in anger, in insecurity, in pride. Detachment slows you down, not because you're weak, because you're deliberate, and deliberate people don't destroy their lives over temporary feelings. Now, I want you to think about the version of you that brought you here, the one who gets pulled into overthinking, the one who spirals when something feels uncertain, the one who wants to be calm but keeps getting triggered. That version of you isn't broken. That version of you is just running old software, old patterns that were once protection. Maybe you learned to chase clarity because silence felt dangerous. Maybe you learned to explain yourself because being misunderstood felt like rejection. Maybe you learned to people-please because conflict felt like abandonment. Maybe you learned to overthink because your mind believed thinking was safety. None of that makes you weak. It makes you human. But you don't have to live there forever. This audiobook wasn't here to shame you for reacting. It was here to give you a new standard. I can feel it without following it. Because the goal is not to remove emotion from your life. The goal is to remove emotion from the driver's seat. But let me recap the heart of what you've practiced, without making it complicated. You learned that detachment is not coldness, it's stability. You learned that the pause is where your power lives. 10 seconds can change your entire future. You learned that triggers are just buttons, and you don't have to hand people the remote. You learned that validation is a drug when you don't approve of yourself first, and that you can live by standards instead of approval. You learned that some people will be wrong about you, and that you can survive that discomfort without begging to correct it. You learned that rumination is not deep thinking. It's pain looping in circles, and you can break it with naming and action. You learned that warm boundaries are not walls. They're the way you stay kind without being consumed. And you learned the final truth. Unbothered is not numb. Unbothered is mastered. If you're wondering what to do next, I don't want you to overpromise to yourself. Don't say, from today on, I'll never react again. That's not realistic. Instead, choose something small, something you can actually keep. Here's a simple 72-hour challenge. 3 days. That's it. For the next 72 hours. When you feel triggered, wait 10 seconds before you respond. Even if your ego hates it, even if your fingers want to type, even if your mouth wants to fire back. 10 seconds. Then ask one question. What response will I respect tomorrow? That's detachment in real time. Also, for the next 72 hours, stop over-explaining. If you need to clarify something, say it once, clean and calm, and stop. Because the more you explain to someone who isn't listening, the more you train yourself to beg. You don't need to beg, you need to be clear. And finally, for the next 72 hours, catch one rumination loop per day. Just one. When you notice your mind replaying something, don't fight it. Name it. This is rumination. Breathe once, then do one 5-minute action. Anything physical, anything forward. That's how you retrain your brain, not with motivation, with evidence. Because every time you pause instead of reacting, you give yourself evidence. I can control me. And that evidence is how your identity changes. I want to end with something personal. The more I've practiced detachment in my own life, the more I've realized it isn't just emotional control. It's self-respect. It's you telling yourself, I refuse to ruin my peace for what I can't control. It's you saying, I won't abandon myself just to keep someone else comfortable. It's you choosing to be calm, not because life is calm, but because you are committed to who you want to be. And the beautiful part is, when you become calmer, you don't just change your own life. You change the atmosphere around you. You become the person who doesn't add gasoline to fire. You become the person who can hold tension without turning it into chaos. You become the person others feel safe around because you are safe inside yourself. That's power, not loud power. Quiet power, the kind that lasts. So if you take one sentence from this entire audiobook, let it be this. You don't need to become cold to be strong. You just need to become steady. Stay calm, stay kind, stay in control. And when you slip, because you will sometimes, don't punish yourself. Return to the pause. Return to your breath. Return to the person you're building, because detachment isn't perfection. Detachment is practice. And every day you practice, your peace becomes less fragile. Thank you for listening.